All right. Good morning, everybody. I see our participants are joining us slowly but surely. So it's early. We're just all getting a good start to the day with some wine. Why not? But yeah, we'll give everybody a second to log in here. Dan, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll just take a couple minutes to introduce our session today, and then we'll be off and running. Good morning again, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is our final installment of the New York Wine Reference Guide series. Welcome to the Niagara Escarpment. If you've been joining us all along, and many of you have, you probably already know that this series was designed really to bring the New York Wine Reference Guide to life. Each season, or we hope there will be seasons, but each session has provided a really deep dive into New York's major wine regions. And we're pairing that with the discussion with the high profile winery representative from the area, along with an exciting tasting component. So our last session is no different, led by our friend and editor of the New York Wine Reference Guide, wine writer and educator, Dan Belmont. Today, we're also pleased to welcome Duncan Ross, co-owner of Arrowhead Spring Vineyards. Arrowhead Spring produces fine wine in the Niagara Escarpment AVA with a focus on sustainability, and I'm sure Duncan's going to share a lot more with us today during our session. And so without much further ado, I'll just kick it off with a few housekeeping items. First, as you all see, we are again in webinar format today, but we definitely encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. That's the benefit of being here live. And I believe we've enabled the Q&A tool so that if you see a question that you like, you can upvote it to the ones that folks are most interested in float to the top, Dan. So if you see those, you can answer those. If you'd like to say hi or ask questions any other way or speak to other folks in the chat, you can certainly do that. And I will be happy to poke in there and try to grab those for you as well, Dan. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. Again, before I turn it over to Dan, just a reminder that we are recording today's call. We're going to be sending that plus a link to the handouts for you to use later. Dan, this is our final session. I think it's officially now in yours and Duncan's capable hands. I know we have a lot to cover today, so I'm happy to hand it over to you both.
Thank you so much, Val. Always a pleasure to be back. Once again, this is number 9 in our series. We made it, but don't fear, there will be more. We've got some more sessions slated for later this year, so I'll be back after the summer. Can't wait. Okay, we do have a lot to cover today. I'm going to kick us off with a short video that I produced after visiting the Niagara Escarpment AVA last year, and then we'll introduce Duncan again and jump right into our presentation. Okay, here we go. Fantastic. Hopefully everybody can see that, and away we go.
The Niagara Escarpment is a limestone ridge that is between 400 and 200 feet above sea level. It runs east to west, so all of our slopes face north, facing Lake Ontario. We're about 7 miles from Lake Ontario, where we are right now at the top of the escarpment. That lake moderates our climate as most bodies of water do. The lake is 300 miles long, 30 miles across, and 800 feet deep. Quite a lot of water. It never freezes over. So in the wintertime, that brings us a little bit warmer temperatures, but more importantly, in the fall, that extends our season a little bit.
We're near Buffalo, and when people think of Buffalo, they think of harsh winters. But up in the Niagara region, we really don't get those, and they call this area in Niagara the hole in the sky. There's usually a bright, clear sky right above the winery, which you can kind of see today, where it's cloudier out by the lake and over the escarpment, and a little bit nicer weather here.
So within the Niagara AVA, there's about 400 acres of grapes planted. About half of that is vinifera, the other half would be hybrids and natives. There's probably 15 wineries between the AVA and the lake shore, all focusing on a slightly different take.
Riesling.
That's the right answer for all of New York State. Riesling is the go-to. Riesling can be done in any style. Riesling shows terroir better than any grape in the world, as far as I'm concerned. We've done it in pretty much every style.
Every style, from pet nat
exists.
to a dry, sparkling, everything.
Tried perfected Charmat method.
Yeah.
So,
Almost lost the winemaker that day, but yeah.
There's a lot of Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc in the region, Pinot Noir. I think everybody has a Pinot Noir here because it grows so well. And then beyond that, you can find hybrids like Vidal, Vidal ice wine, Cabernet Franc ice wine.
we don't ever see really high Brix levels. That's something reserved for other places of the world. That's not the style of wine that we create. We want nice acid, we want zippy, we want balance. We want lower alcohols, better food wine.
The lake works in conjunction with the escarpment, with the hill, in driving wind. So on days where, like today, where the lake water is very warm, there's air rising above the lake, and the wind direction tends to be towards the lake. When the reverse is true and the lake is cooler than it is on the land is warmer, the air rises over the land and the breeze comes from the lake into the land. Because the escarpment is so high, that tends to be a circular pattern of wind. And that air movement is very important for grapes, as well as other fruit crops, in managing disease.
Truly, every winery in this region is unique. We have mead, we have fruit wines, we have, the more traditional grape wines, hybrids, vinifera, sparkling, late harvest, and the wonderful capability of doing ice wines in the region too. So there's so many things to try, no matter your palate style. I definitely would recommend coming out and giving it a sample.
As far as our region goes, I think we're uniquely poised. We're in a spot between Toronto and New York City, if you ask me. Two of the major cities on the East Coast, the major cities on the East Coast. And we're the last piece of that equation that connects the dots. I can really see someday some international wine route that travels down from Toronto through us, through the Finger Lakes, and flies out of New York City, taking a lot of wine along the way. We have a lot more plantable acreage than people realize. It's a big region. All of it's agricultural, and we're growing.
Okay. Duncan, you're a star. That was a pretty good video. I don't think we really need to talk much. I think we covered it all. No, there is a lot more to cover today. And so we're going to dive right in. We'll take a quick look at our New York State map. You have the Niagara Escarpment up here, okay, in the northwestern corner of the state. The Niagara Escarpment is a massive topographic feature. It's about 650 miles long, and it formed from sediments deposited in a shallow, warm sea about 420 to 445 million years ago. And over the millennia, the coral reefs transformed into hard dolomite, so like limestone, ridge, and the formation can be traced in a giant horseshoe from near Rochester through the Niagara Peninsula, south of Lake Ontario, and all the way around. It goes under the water of Lake Huron and reappears and Manitoulin Island across from northern Michigan and down the west side of Lake Michigan to the state of Wisconsin. And so the final shape was formed along with the Great Lakes around 12,000 years ago on the retreat of our Ice Age glaciers. And the Niagara Escarpment slopes to the north, dropping about 200 feet towards Lake Ontario. The New York portion of the Niagara Escarpment has a continental climate, and it's heavily influenced by both Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And the AVA's vineyards are planted between 200 and 400 feet of elevation, and on these soils that were once this lakeshore bed. The deep gravelly limestone and clay loam-based soils of the Niagara Escarpment AVA have been proven ideal for viticulture. Okay. And there we have our Niagara Escarpment map. And basic facts for you there. As we said in the video, we have native, hybrid, and vinifera all growing in harmony. We've got about 58 farms and 1,100 acres under vine. Those were our 2011 numbers, so there's always changes as we've noted. Our average growing season, about 205 days. And again, we're talking kind of the Niagara region is more than just the escarpment AVA. It also includes the Lake Plain area north of the escarpment. And yeah, we'll get into that too. So the influence that Lake Ontario imparts on this tiny 18-mile section of the Niagara Escarpment creates a unique microclimate in those elevations between 400 and 600 feet. In combination with the fertile soils, it's providing ideal growing conditions for many varieties. And the Niagara Lake Plain is situated between the Niagara Escarpment AVA and Lake Ontario. So both regions are benefit from both the escarpment and Lake Ontario's climactic effects, which we will dig into now. Duncan, how was that for an overview? Anything I missed?
You got everything. I think we're done.
All right. Okay, good.
No, I think yeah, a couple of comments as I watched the video again. Leonard Oaks was on there. They are in the lake area, kind of in the upper right corner of this picture. Mm-hmm. And right almost on the lake. And they said Riesling, and Riesling does really well along the lake. It's a little bit cooler there. The reds tend to get better ripeness in the escarpment AVA, where it tends to be a little bit warmer. Yep. But other than that, there's great Pinot Noir being grown near the lake, Cabernet Francs. It's very similar to Finger Lakes climatically, where the escarpment's actually quite a bit warmer. I think it's the second warmest region in the state. Jonathan mentioned plantable acreage. I'd like to underscore that. We have a lot of plantable acreage available in the region. And I'm actually surprised that it hasn't taken off as a region, because the land is super cheap and really, really good land.
Awesome. Everybody take note. It's the hot spot.
Yeah, it's been a fruit growing region for 300 years.
Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, we'll touch on some history today as well. So let's kind of go into a bit more of the geography and climate bits here. And so this is a great image here that's kind of showing our kind of wind pattern created by either the hot air or the cold air of the lake, and how it interacts with the escarpment. So that's airflow, creating a moderating lake effect. And you're getting, as a result, decreased cloud cover, especially in the summers, a lot of sunshine, and also, again, wind movement, which is going to help your fruit with mildew and pests and diseases and all that kind of thing. So again, our limestone content, it's putting the soil in the correct range for optimal nutrient uptake, and clay soil components are holding moisture for the long summers. And so, the lakes are the region's largest temperature moderator. They're extending our growing season in conjunction with the escarpment by keeping air moving, especially during times that are risky for frost. And so, again, as Duncan said, this has made the escarpment prime fruit growing region for hundreds of years. The proximity of the escarpment to the lake is, again, just really creating a sunny spot. I was there. It was summer, and it was a beautiful day. As you saw, there really was quite blue skies, nice gentle breeze that was pretty persistent, which is great. It's giving you some wind power, too, for our sustainability approaches. And Lake Ontario itself, it's got the smallest surface area of the Great Lakes, but it's one of the deepest. And so it's got a max depth of 802 feet. It does prevent it from freezing over. And so, again, we're coming in over 200 frost-free days of growing season. Less than 5% of winters are reaching temperatures below 10 degrees. Winter vine kill and bud damage from early frosts are largely avoided. In the spring, the effect of the escarpment is reversed, and the sun is warming the land, and the air rises to then settle over the lake. Duncan, how did you guys fare with the frost event in mid-May this year?
So that frost event was interesting. The Lake Plain, they had quite a bit of damage up north towards the lake. We did not see damage on our vines that were bearing. It was insignificant, but we did see damage in the vines we planted last year. We had 12 acres of brand new vines, which were about 2 or 3 inches tall at the time.
Mhm.
And so just about, I would say for all intents and purposes, everything got hit low to the ground. But it looks like that's all bounced back at this point. Even on the lake plain, the secondaries came out, and hopefully we'll have a long growing season, and we'll be able to get fruit from the lake plain as well as the escarpment. But the escarpment, by and large, survived that. I was in Ontario, just across the Niagara River on Saturday, and everything there looked great.
Good. Yeah, very good. And so climatically, it sounds like you guys have a pretty good setup there, but are there challenges that you guys are kind of always on the lookout for in terms of climate?
Yeah, there's always something. So
the leading question, but
yeah, it is a leading question. So from a growing perspective, it's not easy to grow grapes anywhere in the world. Every region has its challenges. So last year was a very dry year up until the first week in August when we got rain, and that everything was picture perfect first week in August. And within 2 weeks, we had lost about 25% of our foliage to downy mildew, which apparently is resistant to one of the sprays that we were using for downy mildew. But it came on suddenly, it came on quickly. We dealt with it. That led to a longer season for us to get the grapes ripe, but it wasn't devastating. It was certainly disappointing, but it does underline the challenges in the region. The weather has always been variable. I've lived here my whole life, and it's just gotten more variable as I've gotten older, and maybe I'm just paying more attention to it.
No, I think that's been the general trend, when we get to this kind of section for our webinars, is most people are just saying there's extremes in all directions, right? And that's, as our climate continues to change. In terms of our soils, we kind of touched on that, but we've got clay over a limestone base with streaks of glacial till, slopes ranging from 3 to 6%, with providing air drainage and frost protection. Limestone content, again, in the correct nutrient range for viticulture, as well as clay soil components holding our moisture for long summers. The soils in the lake plain are alluvial, lake-laid sands, silts, and gravels, and with proper outlets, they can be well drained to very well drained. These soils often have surface gravel to surface rock, and that content can absorb considerable solar energy to heat up during the day and release that heat to the vineyards at night. And so, Duncan, kind of take me through a typical, and I know, again, typical is a terrible word, but a typical season. When are you generally looking for bud break? When are you generally seeing veraison for your reds? And then take me through a kind of a harvest.
Sure. Bud break, that's a great question too. It's been as early as April 12th. Okay. It has been as late as end of May, third week in May. Typically, it is around mid-May. Mm-hmm. Veraison is typically in August, second week. And harvest here, we've had years like 2012 where everything was in by October 12th. That was the record. Wow. We've harvested as late as November 14th. And typically we will still have foliage on the vines at that point. We have very, very long sunny days here, as you alluded to earlier. Sunset this time of the year is around 9 p.m. Stays light a little while longer. Those really long days compress the growing season for the vines. Because it's almost math that we're getting that sunshine, and that converts into fruit. And the longer the vines are under the sun, the faster things go. But yeah, that's what the season looks like for us.
Mm-hmm. Duncan, we got a question that came through, and this is something that you and I have kind of talked about at length. And so maybe we can kind of share a little bit of this. But Edward came in and said that there are a number of award-winning wineries just outside of the Niagara AVA. For example, Chateau Niagara scored 92 points for a 2020 Cab Franc in the American Fine Wine Competition of Florida. And they also produce some award-winning Saperavi. But the question is, how is the Niagara AVA defined, and why doesn't it include some of the other wineries in the area that would otherwise add to the national and international recognition of this entire region? And I think for me, we tend to be very AVA focused in New York. We've got these 7 AVAs we talked about them, and then there's our sub AVAs, which is kind of the stuff that I'll be working on later this year. And so the Niagara as a region, so as we talk to it about as a region, kind of expands beyond the AVA, right? And so what were the kind of defining markers for the Niagara Escarpment AVA? And then do you know why it wasn't a larger kind of swath of the region to kind of define Niagara as a whole?
I do know.
I know you do.
We're just starting up at that point. Can you go backwards in this to the overview of New York AVAs?
Of course.
Because this kind of shows the escarpment and why. So the position between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie in Canada, which is all in white on the map, they call that the Niagara Peninsula. That peninsula weather pretty much extends through the AVA of the Niagara Escarpment, and that's due to the proximity of both lakes, keeping that little tip of land warm. Beyond that, to the east, it gets cooler and cooler. The wind action from the elevation is the other reason that the escarpment is drawn the way it is. It's very steep on the left, which is on the west side, and it gets less steep as you go towards the east, which is why it's getting larger north to south. There are some areas that do face south on the escarpment, and those are really interesting. That there was one around the corner that overlooks some commercial buildings, but it was a beautiful piece of land. Somebody bought it for housing, but I would have loved to have planted grapes there, because the south-facing slope on the escarpment would have been really, really interesting. So then north of the escarpment, towards the lake, the effect of the wind is less in the lake plain area. But then when you get up towards the shore of the lake, you get that wind effect again. Their springs are delayed a couple of weeks. But their falls can be extended a little bit. They're less dependent on the sunshine and more dependent on the temperature of the water in terms of moderating. Very much, same thing as the Finger Lakes.
Sure.
But yeah, great wines. Chateau Niagara is making some outstanding wines. They're growing Saperavi and a couple other of those red juice varieties. Really outstanding products. Schulte's up there as well on the lake. There's a number of them. Probably about half the wineries are in the AVA and half outside.
Yeah, I think that the takeaway for me, and I think this is definitely more of an overall comment on the AVA system, is anything can define an AVA. Right. An AVA can be defined by the political borders. It could be defined by county lines. The Niagara Escarpment happens to be defined by the escarpment itself, that limestone ridge. And that's why it's a very specific place. And it has, if you read the petition for the AVA, it's going to, talk about all these very specific kind of climactic and geological features that make it particularly well suited. And that is not to say that you can grow grapes in the larger Niagara region. And there's nothing to stop anyone from putting in an application for a Niagara region AVA that would even encompass the escarpment AVA, similar to how the Finger Lakes is the larger swath. However, the majority of the viticulture is between those 3 major lakes, and 2 of them have sub AVAs. And so, I like to say an AVA does not a region make, just because
it's true. Yeah. But I think Political borders, yes, they do enter into it, but it is defined by growing, unique growing qualities. So we've got hundreds of years of experience with the escarpment. There's also hundreds of years experience with the lake. I know that they put the lake plain in as an AVA and the name was denied.
Oh, okay.
I don't think anyone else has taken a run at it.
Mm.
When the escarpment was defined, we started looking around for land. We wanted to be in the AVA. We did not want to be outside the AVA.
Mhm.
A couple reasons. We wanted to grow primarily reds. And secondarily, we thought from a marketing perspective, it's better to be in the AVA than out.
Sure.
If you look at the Canadian side, I forget how many AVAs they have now, whatever they're called in Canada. There's probably too many, but they've got it really down to these micro regions. It's almost like a little Burgundy.
Maybe they just like paperwork.
Yeah, they do like paperwork. Yeah.
All right. Well, Edward, I hope that helped clear things up a bit. And so I guess, we talk about, we tend to talk a lot about the challenges of viticulture. And I think, you hit it on the nose. Viticulture is hard anywhere, right? But what are we seeing in the results of the wines that make the challenges worth it, right? What's getting you out of bed every day?
This time of the year, weeds. And you can see in the picture, we do, as many wineries do, I know Chateau Niagara does as well, mechanical cultivation under the vines, and that's weed management. So it's not weed elimination. So you get this kind of tangle of soil churning under the vines. The weather really plays into it. I've seen some pictures this year of people dealing with things in California because they had a lot of rain over the winter, and they're taking pictures of the vineyards, and to my eyes, everything looks dead. On and not the vines, but the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's the occasional weed. This illustrates exactly what we're dealing with. Super rich soils. It rains every week or two, and there's water literally coming out of the ground as well on the escarpment. So how we deal with that water is there's drain tile running down every one of these rows, 4 feet down. That is a pretty common practice here. And it's becoming more common practice even for people who are doing wheat or corn, making sure that their ground is not too wet.
Yeah, it's very different. In a lot of those California regions, because of the temperatures that you see during the summer, many of the plants just go dormant, right? And so, in Napa, almost all of your growth is during the winter, if and when there is rain. And during the summer, there's not a whole hell of a lot of action. Whereas here, you guys are just
it's everything.
Trucking along, yeah.
You can see these vines are growing up on the. Sorry, I'm pointing my screen here.
No, please.
You're not standing here in the room with me, but it feels like it. Look at that growth on the tops. It's obviously hedging is an issue here. We need to get in there and hedge a couple times. We do leaf removal regionally. It's keeping the fruit open to the air is super important. Having that air movement is important. Keeping up with the spray program obviously is important. But you cannot spray your way to success. You have to have the practices of the leaf removal, of the hedging, keeping that canopy open to the wind, making sure that the weeds aren't climbing up through the canopy. Those are all challenges here that I think are unique to East Coast vineyards in general.
Excellent. All right, let's keep moving on. Just a bit of history in the region. Wine growing has began in the region before the Civil War. The Niagara grape, which is a Concord and Cassidy crossing, was developed in Lockport, New York, which is right in the AVA. And the similar to what we kind of discussed with Lake Erie's grape belt, the Niagara region did experience a production boom kind of up until the end of the 1800s, the 1890s, where the market took a hit due to overproduction. Then we enter Prohibition and get ourselves out on the other end. We have some new plantings that flourished in the 1960s. But really kind of the modern industry as we see it today from a commercial standpoint, those businesses mostly resurged in the early 2000s. And so just as an example, and this isn't necessarily a super accurate barometer, but in 2002, the Niagara Wine Trail route was established. This is again just a marketing body, but again the root is tripled in size. We've got or more than that rather. We've got 6 wineries within the AVA and 13 in the surrounding region. And so again, it's the Niagara region goes beyond the AVA escarpment, but in terms of our AVA definition, that particular strip was what needed to be defined. And great, we're going to go into our tasting. We've got 3 wines for us today, and Duncan, you help me choose the wines for our flight. I've got a fairly pointed question for you. Where are the whites?
Where are the whites?
Better than that. Just what are the let's just talk about white grapes and what's growing and what's working, and then we'll dig into our flight.
Yeah. So of course, there's a lot of Riesling for whites. I think Riesling is fairly popular. There's a lot of Chardonnay. There might be as much Chardonnay as Riesling at least in the AVA. We're playing around with Viognier. I don't know how that'll work out. I think we're the only ones. Up on the lake, I know Victorienberg is doing a good job with some of the aromatic whites like Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. Longcliffe does a Pinot Gris as well. And they do a Sauvignon Blanc. I was going to include Sauvignon Blanc or the Pinot Gris, but they were sold out. So that's why we got Blanc Frankish, which was almost sold out.
Yeah. When we did the intro session where we covered all one wine from all 7 AVAs, we presented your Chardonnay, and that wine was very well received. Fantastic. Let's go in. Generally speaking, with our whites, though, we're talking high acid, right? We're talking very bright fruit. Most of the vinification, are you seeing a lot of oak usage on our white wines, or are we mostly in stainless steel and keeping things fresh and snappy?
Fresh and snappy seems to be what consumers are looking for. And I think, if you look at Chardonnay across New York State, just not even in this area, in a cooler climate like the Niagara Escarpment and the greater region, Chardonnay is a star. It's very different than the box Chardonnay that you might pick up in the grocery store, which might have had a higher alcohol content or heavy-handed oak treatment, things like that. When we started out, I did I think the first vintage of Chardonnay, I put 13 brand new French oak barrels, and for about 9 months, and it was lovely. It was really good, but it took a long time to sell. So that was a hard lesson learned on. Don't make necessarily what you like, make what the consumers are looking for, because everybody's going to have a different palate.
As I build my retail portfolio here, that's something I have to remind myself quite often. It's like it's not about your palate, Dan. It's about everybody's palate. But luckily, I like a little bit of everything, so that works out okay.
Yeah, some of it's about your palate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not all of it. Yeah.
There's some personality that's got to go in, that's got to come through there, right? If I recall, your Chardonnay wasn't particularly high in alcohol, if memory perceives.
We typically harvest at 22, 23 bricks on purpose.
Yep.
We look for phenolic ripeness. And again, this is a lesson we learned one year when we got 25 bricks, which you can do, but it's not necessarily a great idea, because a 13.5% alcohol Chardonnay is not. I don't think anybody's looking for that. So,
okay. So you said you were playing with Viognier. Is there anything else you'd be excited to see on the white varieties? We had a question come through. Curious about Chenin Blanc for the region.
Yeah, I saw that question. I don't know if anybody's doing Chenin Blanc. It wouldn't surprise me. I've seen Petit Meunier, I think, is somebody's experimenting with that in Canada. But yeah, Chenin Blanc, haven't seen it. Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, those are kind of the outliers. I like the Pinot Blanc from up on the lake. I think it reminds me of being in Alsace.
Sure. Yep. It's a grape. We touched on that one with our Long Island session. It's a grape that does well down there as well. Fantastic. Let's get into our flight. We're going to start with the White Long Cliff Vineyard and Winery, Reserve Blaufränkisch, 2019 with 12% AVA. Duncan, why did you choose a Blaufränkisch? I know you said the other wine was out of stock, and we got a little bit of this left over, so that's great. Is Blaufränkisch an exciting grape for the region? Is it something we'd like to see more of?
I would like to see more of this. When I suppose I could control that by planting some, but as I say that, yeah, it would be nice. I like Blaufränkisch. It's a really nice wine. I lived in Germany for a while, and there's a lot of it there, in Germany and Austria. And I was surprised because I thought of Germany as all Riesling, which of course is silly. No country or region is all anything. But this one does really well. Every year they produce a super Blaufränkisch, and the growth is phenomenal. I look at the vines and they all look great.
It's very good. It's got pretty varietally typical notes on the nose. We got some kind of dark red berries, dark red fruit, black cherries, things like that. We've got some touch of smoke, I think, which I kind of like. And there's definitely some white pepper going on as well. You can tell it's going to be a little spicy, a little zingy. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good food wine. I like this with pizza pasta. Pizza is my favorite food, so I break pizza into several food groups. This would be a margarita or pepperoni pizza wine.
Yep, I dig that. That's great. Yeah, again, we're seeing nice kind of high acid here, which is just again that kind of signature New York trademark that we should really just continue to embrace, because it does such a good job with our food pairings for sure. We're going to touch on Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. Tell me a little bit more about Pinot Noir in the region, just because I know it is something that you're particularly passionate about, and if there are any other red grapes that are worth touching on.
So Pinot Noir was probably the first vinifera varietal planted on the escarpment, planted by a guy who started a winery called Warm Lake Estate, which I think he got up to about 40 acres and then went out of business. And the lesson there was you can't just produce Pinot Noir, I guess. But it was great stuff. And the vines, most of them continue to this day producing grapes for the region. And I think everybody either has Pinot Noir planted or has access to Pinot Noir from several growers who grow Pinot, who don't have wineries. You'll find that I think everybody in the region has a Pinot Noir.
And are you guys kind of drawing that connection to Pinot's affinity for limestone?
Yes, yeah, that's the marketing piece of it. Sure, Burgundy has limestone. We have limestone, therefore we are Burgundy. I don't know. That's not really true.
Sure.
I mean, it is true that we have limestone and they have limestone. I've been to Burgundy and it is similar. But no two regions, halfway around the planet are going to be the same. The limestone helps all vinifera grapes by moderating the acidity in the soil. So to give you an example, we needed to put some lime down in a new field, which typically will adjust, half a point on pH before we plant. The lime company actually went out of business that used to bring it out and truck it. And so I was looking at buying a lime spreader and had to go all the way down to the Pennsylvania line before I found people who generally put lime on their vineyards on a regular basis. Here it's a once every 10, 20 year kind of thing. So that limestone helps, and it helps with the mineral uptake in the vine itself.
Okay, so Pinot Noir, we got Blaufränkisch or Lemberger, we've got Cab Franc, we've got Cab Sauv. Anything else?
Merlot, although we did have a freeze event that took out what are now known as our less robust areas of the vineyard. We found a couple of freeze pockets.
Yep.
So Merlot's very cold sensitive. Syrah,
Mm-hmm.
we're growing Syrah. I think there's one or two others growing Syrah as well.
Yep. Yeah, I tasted your Syrah. Yeah, quite fun.
Yeah, very peppery, northern Rhone kind of flavor profile. Grows great. Very super vigorous, even with a non-vigorous rootstock.
And so Edward threw out that the Ontario government announced the addition of Marquette, which is a hybrid of Landau and Pinot Noir. It was recognized as a certified variety. Do you see expansion of this variety in the region? I did want to bring up, kind of the relationship with hybrid grapes, and so this might be a good opportunity to tackle that.
Yeah, so we do have some hybrid grapes here, but because the climate is so warm relative, I guess, to other places where you'd need to grow a Marquette,
sure.
It's easier to grow vinifera because it's easier to sell it. What the challenge is, the challenge is, how do you sell wine from a region nobody's ever heard of? And at least if you've got a variety that they've heard of, that's a step in the right direction. But it is very challenging, very exciting being a pioneer in a region, and starting up in a region that's new. But at the same time, when you get to sales, it's harder because you have to explain the story of the region.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I enjoy learning about my Canadian wine regions. I did a master class recently here in London with wines of Nova Scotia, and it's always just refreshing to know that there are more marginal climates than the ones that we're working with in New York.
That's true.
I mean,
yeah.
But one of the nice things is I find that they're really not gosh, what's the word? They're not ashamed. There's no kind of shame about their hybrids. They pretty much put their wines out and they said, this is the grape that we're making with it. They don't, it could be a hybrid, it could be a vinifera. They don't really put the emphasis on it that we do in the United States and in New York particularly. And I found that kind of refreshing. They're like, this is what grows well for us and it makes great wine and we stand by it. And so I think we'll continue to see that shift, not necessarily in Niagara, but just kind of as a general shift where we kind of start to take a step back from grape varieties. I hosted an event last night and poured an Italian wine from Sicily, and it was Gracanico. And no one had heard of this grape variety, and I said, admittedly, neither had I until I tasted this wine. But damn, isn't it good?
Yeah. There's a lot of great wine being made all around the world. It's just the way wine is marketed. Typically, it's a very small group of influencers, larger than it used to be. I mean, it used to be Robert Parker, right? And now it's more than that. But it's really difficult to find those gems. But I do like to buy an unusual bottle of wine from a region I've never heard of because it's eye-opening. We do have hybrids here though as well. We do Traminette. Baco Noir is grown in the region. When I was growing up here in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of hybrids being grown for the wineries. I think the 4 or 5 wineries that were in the Finger Lakes at the time.
Right. So generally, I think the region is mirroring kind of statewide trends where we're seeing the increased plantings of vinifera, slightly decreased plantings of hybrids. However, we're not eschewing the importance of the hybrids as terms of maybe what comes down the line in the future.
Oh yeah, and like Traminette is wonderful. We make wine with Traminette here as well, and terrific wine, very fruity, good acidity. Cornell is busily working on more and more varieties, and that's good.
I think when I was with the guys at Leonard Oaks, they also did a Port of Vignoles for me, and I thought that was also showing really well.
When I was a home winemaker, I used to make Vignoles, and it's a great wine.
Fantastic. Well, let's go into wine number 2, and I'm going to hand it off to you because it is your wine, the Arrowhead Spring Estate Cabernet Franc. This is the 2019 vintage. We've got 13% ABV. Take it away.
All right. So Cabernet Franc, also a 2019 vintage, kind of an average year. Cabernet Franc, we planted it because we knew it would live. We liked it and we knew it would live, and it's really taken hold. So it is the most widely planted varietal that we have here. It might be upstate New York's most widely planted vinifera, red at least.
Yep.
Very popular across the state. Grows well here. We're typically bringing this in at 24 to 25 bricks. In terms of sugar, it's been as low as 22. Acidity is usually pretty good. pH is around 3.3 to 3.5. So a good start, nice and crisp. Good food wine, as most reds from upstate New York would be. This would be my go-to with big red sauce pasta, or a steak. It's got that acidity, a little bit herbal on the nose, and a little smoky and slightly peppery, but lots of berry fruit in there.
And how do you vinify? What's the oak treatment? I assume there's oak.
So this is 2 years in a variety of oak, American, French, and Eastern European. I used to be able to spell it out. I've got like 3 different Eastern European Coopers now. But it's, it's more than that. It's people and the TTB are very concerned about how much time it's been barrel aged. But it's really, what are you aging it in? Is it all new oak? Because 2 years in all new oak would be pretty chewy and pretty tannic. So we tend to use about 20-25% new oak, and then everything else tapers off to almost 10 years, completely neutral. And that really works well for us in terms of having a bunch of different wines from a bunch of different barrels to do an assemblage with at the end, with a very large Excel spreadsheet. But yeah, Cabernet Franc, a regional superstar. I think this one does really well nationally. I think Chateau Niagara just got that great score up on the Lake Plain. We've had great scores with Wine Spectator. Other people in the AVA have done the same. It really seems to hit the nail on the head from a quality perspective, and it's just, it would sell out if it wasn't an unknown region.
Yeah, I agree. And to follow with Edward here, it's a lovely wine, and so much.
Thank you, Edward.
I had a fly that really liked it as well. Just jumped in my glass, and so yeah, I think it's a great variety for the region. I think I probably saw more consistency there with the reds that I tasted more than anything else. Yeah, you've got a nice balance. Again, there's fresh acidity here. It's a varietally it's got the varietal typicity, has the varietal typicity of Cabernet Franc, which I always appreciate. I like its little signature capsicum herbal note on the finish. And you've also got a really nice kind of minerality to it as well, where you've got a bit of gravel, a bit of kind of that crushed stone and cedar bits, or graphite rather, a little pencil. I think I find that very attractive. I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoy the grape so much. So yeah, excellent work, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very expressive, and yeah, I think it's a safe bet to buy a Cabernet Franc from anybody in the region.
Yep, very good. All right, and we'll move on to our last one. Last but not least, our Bella Rose. 2021 Cabernet Sauvignon. Duncan, tell me a bit about vintage variation for you guys. I know we talked about the kind of extremes over the last, let's say, 4 years. What have been the kind of big swings and the big takeaways?
So, so the past 4 years, so I can go back to 2018 was a good year. 2019 was a good year, kind of average years. 2020 was both a great year and a terrible year all at the same time, because the weather was outstanding, one of the best weather years we've ever had. But we didn't realize it until we started taking harvest measurements and realized how far along the grapes were because of the pandemic, and we were all distracted. Right. So as we thought about it, we thought, well, yeah, everybody has been pretty much on the patio all summer. Wherever they were, pick a patio. 2021 started out nice and warm and then got wet. So kind of not a great year, but not a bad year. Again, we're used to dealing with weather here in New York State in general. It's going to be variable. It's going to rain, and you just work around it.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, despite a cold and wet 2021, this the Cab Sauv is coming off very ripe and fruit driven to me. It's very pleasant on those.
Yeah, there's some nice oak tones in this one. I don't know what the barrel treatment is that Michael did at Bellarose for this, but it's very nice, very smooth, very drinkable. And Cabernet Sauvignon is not necessarily a grape that you would associate with upstate New York, but we grow it as well, and we find that we get it to ripeness every year, and it really makes an outstanding wine.
Yeah, I really like the texture on this. It's quite soft on the mid palate, which is great. Feels very plush, and then closes up towards the finish and gives you that bit of tannin, particularly right at the tip of your tongue.
Yeah,
which is nice. But again, acidity is there, so I'm salivating, which is really good. And yeah, this is a good another good food wine for sure. Yeah. I'd kind of go for anything grilled, just even a nice cheeseburger would do the trick with this wine for sure. But anything with a bit of char on it, I think would be really lovely.
Yeah, it's very smooth.
Yeah, and you could play with some rich dishes as well. I mean, there's a lot of flavor here, and you've got that acidity. It's going to keep you coming back for more. Yeah, well done. Very good. Okay, fantastic. Let's keep going. We're going to do a touch on sustainability here. As we know, the New York Wine and Grape Foundation launched a sustainability program, and we believe that sustainability will define and preserve our future, solidifying our place in the wide world of wine. And Niagara is chock full of dedicated sustainability warriors. Duncan, tell me a couple of the kind of initiatives that you guys have taken at Arrowhead Spring, just to increase your sustainability.
Yeah, so we started out shooting for organic, and we really wanted to go organic. And neither Robin nor myself were new to farming. We were both new to grapes. She grew up in an apple and fruit tree farming family. But as we progressed through organic, we realized that one of our sprays came off the list, and due to details that I won't get into, we discovered that the organic program was really not sustainable because that spray happened to be a copper spray. Right. It came off the list, and we would have had to switch to a different copper, which would have put our starting point a year later than it was. So we started really looking at what's sustainable and what's not. And just because it's organic, is it sustainable? Yep. And we came to the conclusion that sustainability is related to organic, but organic is not necessarily always sustainable. That makes sense. So we started, we've never used herbicides. We very rarely will spray an insecticide. And when we do, it's an organic one. And we do it at night so that we are just killing Japanese beetles. That's the big pest here.
Okay.
And that's probably once every 3 years.
Mhm.
Because we don't want to kill the pollinators, because all the apple people depend on them.
Of course.
Got involved with the New York State Sustainability Program a year or two ago. I was on the committee and came up with that program, which was a kind of blending of all the practices across the state. And it's a really great baseline starting point.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's a lot of rungs on the ladder we could put, to achieve various levels of sustainability, aside from the base level. So, herbicides is another one. Winery sustainability, energy use, things like that. So we're doing things like solar power, wind power. I know other wineries in the region are also doing that.
Yeah. Especially with the wind. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer.
It does. Yeah.
An investment, of course, but a no-brainer.
Yeah. It's we've had wind power here for 11 years, and it's been very, very beneficial. We put solar in when we built the new winery building back in 2018, because we had roofs that would accommodate it. We didn't have to burn any land for solar. Wind is very efficient from a land use perspective, because it's just a tower goes up and generates your power 100 feet off the ground.
This one I remember from our get together last year. You talked about the weight of the glass that you work with.
Yep, we've been using lightweight glass since the very beginning, and wherever possible, we will buy that. Now, there's been supply chain issues over the past couple of years, which has led to only European glass being available, which, if you think about it, it's kind of crazy when you're putting that on an ocean freighter and bringing it over. But it's not like putting it on a boat in China and bringing it over, which also happens. But we try to source as closely as possible using North American glass, and we go as light as possible, because there's no benefit to a thicker glass bottle. It's a marketing thing that I think there's some folks out there who think that if the bottle weighs as much as a full bottle of wine when it's empty, people are going to think they're getting more value.
Right. I always just get frustrated because I think there's more wine in the bottle and there's not.
Yeah, that's true.
Fantastic. Well, we're just about at time. I'll just leave with a few closing thoughts. But if anyone does have any additional questions for Duncan, please don't hesitate to ping them in. And of course, if you have questions offline, don't hesitate to contact either of us. But let's take a look here. Great. So Niagara wines offer incredible value. We can boast a wide breadth of styles and varieties, as we discussed, and they have the signature of our world-class cool climate. So we have fresh, lively wines, moderate alcohol, lots of flavor and acidity. And compared to other established regions, particularly the U.S. West Coast, our wines are pretty budget friendly to the average consumer. And so overwhelming majority of producers are small and family owned. You're getting that artisan product rooted in unique and fascinating terroir. And so, yeah, the wines, they are terroir-driven wines. They bear the mark of the specific vineyard sites, your location within the Niagara region. And we have our individual winemakers that are putting their signatures on it. And these guys understand balance. Niagara wines are fantastic with food, and with the spectrum of styles across dozens of grapes and production methods. There really is something for everybody in every meal. Duncan, I want to thank you so much for your time today and all your help with me for the Niagara section of the guide, and we'll continue to kind of expand it as we learn more. And so thank you for that. I want to give you the opportunity if you have any closing thoughts, and if I could throw it out there, what are we pushing forward, and what does the next 10 to 20 years look like?
Whoa, that's a lot of questions. So I think I can tell you that Robin and I were talking about this the other day. Robin's my wife and partner here. That when we decided to start a winery in 2002, 2003 and started looking for land, there were a lot of people starting wineries back then in this region. And it was sort of a wave of wineries that started. And there's been a few since then, but not that wave. There was an excitement. So I'm hoping that excitement will turn back to wine. I think that excitement kind of focused on beer for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But-
Well, that's a pretty, large scale trend, and not necessarily specific to the region, but
Right.
I hear you on that one for sure.
But it's a great region. We enjoy the business very much. Super people in it. Everybody here is making great wine, and it's just it's been an experience over the past 20 years to start the business and get products into stores, get distributed, have people like the wine. When you start up, you don't know if you're going to be making a product that other people like. So it's been an adventure, and it's been a shared adventure regionally with everyone. So, and you've got this picture up of the north end of our Merlot underneath the wind turbine. You can see exactly what happened with the cold damage.
Right.
See
Oh
where
yeah. Yeah. Geez, look at that. Yep.
the vines are hedged over to the left. It's Cabernet Franc. We left the Merlot alone because it was freeze damaged up in this corner. And yeah, a lot of those vines ended up needing to be replanted.
Well, we'll end on that one.
Yeah.
And again, Duncan, thank you so much. Edward, I see your last question. I'm going to field that one over to the folks at the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. They've got their finger on the pulse for those initiatives. And so I'm sure they'll be happy to check in with you on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and watching offline afterwards as we share these sessions. It has been an absolute pleasure to join you on your Tuesday mornings for the last 9 weeks. And I hope to see you guys again soon on the other side of the screen. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great summer. Duncan, thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. That was a pleasure. Thanks.